Hello, I'm Michael McMurdy, and this is Toon Wars, a game where you play as a cartoon tank and blow stuff up. I based this game off of an old PlayStation 2 game called Seek and Destroy. It was about this cartoon tank that was fighting a war, and as you completed missions, you could purchase these ridiculous upgrades, like one that would allow you to fly or swim, or another that would replace all your bullets with like these classic bombs that you'd see in cartoons. It was a good game, it was fun. However, after going back and playing through it again, I learned that it basically contained no challenge, which is why I was able to beat it so easily the first time. My goal with Toon Wars was to make a game that was fun and interesting and ridiculous like Seek and Destroy, but with challenge and better gameplay. Toon Wars uses the Unity engine, and all the code is entirely in C#. Destroy the targets was easy enough when I first implemented it, but it quickly became complicated as I added more basic features that should have been there initially. Like, first there was that I added the targeting system, but if you add a targeting system, then you need to know what target you're on, so I had to learn more about the HUD to figure out how to add little targeting markers. But then as I added more turrets, I realized that I needed support for having multiple targets at a time. Just the more I added to the game, the more problems came with just the targeting system. I actually ran into a bug once where it would only calculate the closest target based on my initial spawn position rather than the current position of the tank. So it ended up that I was just kind of wandering around the field, not able to target anything, and I didn't know why, but I could target things again if I went back to the middle of the field where I spawned. Since this was the first mode I worked on, this was also around the time that I was working on the physics and how the tank actually moved and worked. And I'll never forget this bug. It was actually present during my review, and it was that if you drove backwards, you would actually start to lift into the air and fly up. That's something I added so that when you're going really fast as the tank, that you wouldn't flip over if you tried to turn, or you wouldn't just fall over. It was just a downward force that was dependent on how fast you were going. Little did I know, you can have negative speed when you go backwards. I didn't add the scores till later, but those were actually really easy to implement. Implementing multiplayer was probably the most complicated part of the entire game. I actually made the mistake of trying to learn Unity's new HUD while setting up a means for two players to connect, which granted helped out in the long run, but it cost me a lot of time that I needed for other things. Realistically, most of my time that quarter was spent on learning the new HUD, and then redoing all of my HUD that I had already done, and then learning Unity's networking, and then fixing bugs caused by trying to use Unity's networking. There was a lot of redundancy, and realistically the only thing added to the actual game itself was a game over screen, and the ability to die. But thanks to all the issues and bugs I ran into, I used the chance to modularize my code a lot more, so I could avoid those issues in the future. One issue that I ran into was that the game would actually start before your screen was even loaded, which became even bigger of an issue when you start you needed to send a call over to another player to spawn your tank. But the other player wasn't loaded, so they'd never spawn, and the game would just not continue. So this almost negligible amount of time where the game was running but you couldn't actually play it, which could have caused significant problems to someone who's not running the same kind of computer as me, was just dealt with before I knew it was even a problem. Another issue I had was that my tank building function didn't work anymore. The way it worked was that each part would be built in order. It would build the part, and that part would say to build the next one, and then that one would say to build the next one, and so on. But that didn't work when you just sent it over the network. the parts would spawn, but they wouldn't be connected to each other, or they would have all sorts of other problems. So I had to redo my entire tank building function and just send over a text that said which parts to build. It was really annoying because that was a lot of work I had already put into it, but it helped a lot more in the long run because my tank building functions were all over the place. There were checks everywhere to make sure the part had finished building. I was running a lot of redundant code, and thanks to this, I was able to fix that. I'd say out of the entire project, the easiest part was probably the high score save data, and the hardest would definitely be the multiplayer, just because of how much code I had to redo entirely. As far as limitations go, I'd say I can only really get so far with Unity's built-in wheel physics. I'd have to make my own to get the physics where I really want them to be. I think my goal for the future is to add more types of parts, to modularize more of my code, to fix a lot of the redundancies that are still there, and to improve the way the physics work over the network. And that's Toon Wars. Thanks for watching.